Tenway is the second largest logistics truck brokerage company after Yunmanbang. The reason for the suspension of business is that the truck drivers were overcharged, shortened time, and forced to pay low wages. For whatever reason, when Tenway's service was stopped overnight, shippers and truck drivers went into an uproar. If it had been Korea, they would have filed an administrative lawsuit right away, but in China, it is a no-brainer. The business suspension period is 10 days. The problem is that consumers who have used the service in the meantime will go to Yunmanbang or other companies. In this case, even if business resumes later, a blow is inevitable. Yauman sighed and said, "For now, we have no choice but to wait for the suspension to be lifted. Please report the situation from time to time." He went to China to check the situation with Chairman Im Jin-young, and Chairman Han Chan-young also contacted Chinese officials. Fortunately, in the midst of this, the semiconductor, which accounts for the largest portion of Susong Electronics' Chinese sales, was not touched. The expansion of the NAND flash memory plant in Xi'an also proceeded without any problems. Needless to say, semiconductors are now in demand more than supply to the point of being called a supercycle. It's their loss if they say that they won't buy it on the pre-order plate with extra money here and there. And since semiconductors are intermediate goods, imports must be restricted or tariffs imposed. As a result, only the negative effects of increasing the price of Chinese electronic products appear. For reference, China has declared itself to become a semiconductor leader within 5 years. Taijiayu said, "What kind of bastard has so much stamina? That's it. All you have to do is stick with oysters." If you add all of these things together, does it literally become continent rolling? President Zhang Pinghua plans to invest more than 1 trillion yuan to foster the semiconductor industry. This shows just how much China cares about high-tech industries. The same is true for future cars represented by autonomous driving and electric vehicles. So, we must be the enemy who were at the forefront and refused to cooperate with a Chinese company. Taekyu pointed at me and said, "Is that strong earthquake a harmful earthquake?" That's it. If I had pointed to Taekyu and said, "That otaku is a harmful otaku?" The original text is the famous, "That bird is a harmful bird." This is what Mao Zedong said when referring to the sparrows that peck at the grain. With a single word from the president, the people made the Chinese sparrow extinct. The result? All kinds of pests, including grasshoppers which sparrows ate, arose, and the worst famine occurred, and tens of millions of people died of starvation, not just because of this, but because of the comprehensive failure of the Great Leap Forward. The problem is that these traditions are still being passed down. As soon as the party points out that that company is a harmful company, it moves in every direction, applying all sorts of nonsensical regulations and sanctions to expel them. But now are we the targets? China's economy is a form of state capitalism, a combination of the Communist Party's unique planned economy and capitalism. As such, there has been a long-standing governmental system in which the government intervenes in businesses. The most famous of these is China's censorship of Internet information, also known as the Golden Shield. China thoroughly blocks information that is harmful to the socialist system and the Communist Party. American companies are no exception to this, and Gubble and FaceNote, which are used by people all over the world, were blocked, and Internet companies were also subject to various restrictions. Meanwhile, Baidu dominated the Chinese search market, Aligeny dominated the online market, and WeChat dominated the game and content market. Unlike global companies, they strictly follow the policies of the Chinese government. On portals and SS, only the articles and information the government wants are displayed, and information such as the Cultural Revolution and the Tiananmen Square incident is blocked from being searched. In any case, it was clear that the Chinese government was targeting and moving companies related to OTK Company. Fortunately, the sanctions were limited to companies invested by Susong Electronics, Unsung Motors and OTK Company, and the sparks did not spread to other Korean companies. However, it was a serious enough situation, and it was also a problem that local companies who read the intentions of the Chinese government were paying attention. China insists that sanctions against Unsung Motors and Susong Electronics are normal activities of administrative authorities, and the cancellation of other events related to Korea has nothing to do with them. The opposition Liberal National Party raised a voice that the government should immediately protest strongly, but the ruling New Politics Party did not respond properly. As China accounts for the largest share of exports to South Korea, It is said that it will be hit hard if sanctions are spread. I remembered what Vice Chairman Wang Yicheng had said. Did you mean that if a small country goes against a big country it will get angry? Is this a warning or is it just a rant? Even with the passage of time, the sanctions were not easily lifted. The firefighting inspection of the home appliance factory of Seosung Electronics is still in progress, and the exhaust gas investigation of the Unsung car is only being reviewed. And Tenway's business suspension was extended for another 10 days. In the midst of this, China entered into a Japanese inspection against its travel agencies. This is to prevent damage to consumers due to low-priced packages. Then Korean travel products disappeared and scheduled tours were cancelled one after another. The travel industry is in crisis. There were voices from the political circles saying that we should also take some action against Chinese companies, but it was still a riot. The Korean government only paid attention to the Chinese government as the damage to Korea would be much greater if it escalated into a melee battle. I'm watching China closely, not knowing what to do again, but Zhou Motors suddenly unveiled a self-driving car. Chairman Zhou Kai came directly to the presentation room and said, Zhou Cha has been jointly developing autonomous driving technology with several companies. And now it is revealed in front of you. It is more than perfect, the self-driving car JW8. Those who test drove the car were very satisfied and praised the car if it was not inferior to the AD1 and AD2 of Keris. Chairman Zhou Kai said that he would start mass production next month and sell it all over China, and revealed his future plans. Starting with the JW8, we will release 3 more autonomous vehicles within this year, and commercialize driverless taxis and unmanned buses within the next year. At that, the people all stood up and applauded. At home with Take-You, I watched Zhou T's new car presentation on TV. What? They made it too. I nodded my head at Taeyung's words. Because China has also been developing driverless vehicles with IT companies and automakers centered. Leading companies include Zhoucha, Baidu, Wechent, Didi Chuxing and BID. Originally, they developed their own technologies, but after Carlos's technology announcement, the Chinese government led a joint development front. I thought it would take some time until the official release, but it's going to be a surprise release like this. Did you rush to release a car made with your own technology when the joint venture failed? In fact, there are not 1 or 2 companies that have reached completion of autonomous driving technology. GM, Gubble, Nikola, Ever, etc. However, since autonomous driving technology depends on human life, there should be no error. With that slight difference, Keris can take the lead. It's made in China, is it okay? Made in China is not common these days. It is a thing of the past to ridicule people who were made in China. It has now risen to a level that cannot be ignored even in the high-tech field. How big is the technology gap with Keris? As I was thinking, my phone rang. It was none other than Daryl, the CEO of Carlos. I usually contact the company, but there are not many cases of contacting me by cell phone. I pressed the call button. Good morning. Did you watch the Zhou T presentation? For some reason it sounds like a very angry voice. Yes. I just saw it. They copied ours. What do you mean? Daryl said, screaming. These motherfuckers stole our technology. I was surprised by that. Is that really true? We headed straight to Detroit. It is the first time to the US since Big One. Come to think of it, more than half a year has already passed since the Big One happened. A lot of things happened in the meantime. I slept and woke up and arrived at the airport. Take-You yawned and said, when you enter the country, shouldn't the journalists and the welcoming crowd be waiting? I didn't tell anyone except Keris management just in case. I showed my passport at the immigration desk. The employee, who was asking questions and stamping the arrivals with a tired expression, looked at his passport and looked at me with his eyes wide open. No, it's an honor to meet you, Mr. Kong. Nice to meet you too. I put my finger slightly to my mouth to tell no one else. As we exited the arrival hall, a car was waiting outside the airport. It is none other than the AD2 released by Keris. Sergey, Carlos's CFO, came to meet him. You worked hard to come. How you doing? We met after a long time, greeted warmly and got into the car. The car went straight to the Keris headquarters. Sergey spoke to us with only his hand on his steering wheel. Without any need to operate, the car took care of the ride and stopped and broke his steering wheel. As we entered the city, the road was jammed with cars. Among them were AD1 and AD2. I've seen a lot of videos, but it's amazing to see them rolling on the road in person. How is the company atmosphere right now? It's like an emergency. Daryl is so angry that everyone can't even speak to him. While we were talking, we arrived at the company. In the conference room, CEO Daryl, CEO Ryan, and executives were already gathered. Daryl had an extremely angry expression on his face, and his hair was in a mess as he hadn't washed for a long time. I've known him for a long time, but this is the first time I've seen him like this. Instead of saying hello, I immediately asked a question. Did Zhou Cha really copy Keris technology? That's right. I didn't test drive it myself, I just saw it on video. But how are you sure? Then Daryl replied nervously. We reviewed all published videos. Vehicle movements and systems are almost identical to ours. I can tell just by looking at the movement of the wheels. Is this possible? Read more at wuxiax.com. Everyone seemed to agree with Daryl to some extent. In the eyes of ordinary people like us, self-driving cars are all the same, but from the point of view of engineers, there will be slight differences. Daryl has been leading Keris autonomous driving technology development from start to finish as a programmer and engineer at the same time as CEO. Numerous researchers and engineers have been involved, but no one will dispute that he is the father of this technology. It is only natural that affection and pride are that great. If you think that it has been stolen, you will only get angry. Copy doesn't mean you're just imitating, does it? Daryl said confidently. Of course. What I'm saying is that the source code and data are copied. The screen arrangement and operation method of NOS and Andromeda, which divide the smartphone OS market, are almost the same. To some extent they may have been influenced by each other, but they are clearly different operating systems. Copying a picture as it is and reviving the memory of seeing it and drawing it as similarly as possible are two completely different things. Everyone's expression turned serious. I feel the sim awakened as well. Autonomous driving is the original technology of Keris. If you copied this technique, it would be an instant to catch up. How did Zhou Cha copy the Keris technology? No one could easily answer that question. Take-you asked in a low voice. The researchers and engineers were taken away. It is. In fact, Chinese companies have actively recruited talent from NPL, Gubel, Nikola, and GM. On our side, 3 key researchers left and 2 of them went to China. If you include technicians, it will increase even more. However, it is impossible to copy the technology equally by taking a few people. If that was possible, the technology of all companies would have been upgraded. Trial and error can be greatly reduced, but it takes a lot of time for technology development. And the finished result will also be different. Is there any way to prove that you copied it? Daryl said right away. You can compare the source code. A very simple and sure way. If you compare the codes and match each other, you will not be able to subtract or beat. You can't disclose that. Which company would go crazy and disclose their core technology to the outside? Daryl insisted strongly. Then we must disclose it through a lawsuit. Are you going to go to trial in China? Zhou T is a Chinese company, and as much as the country of origin is Chinese, it has to be tried in China. Then of course the Chinese court will favor the domestic company. Because it's China. I said with a sigh. It would be quicker to find the source of the leak and prove it. Said Sergey. Right now, we are continuously checking to see if there was a connection to the server by hacking or an illegal route. How likely are you? Ryan shook his head. Close to 0. All security is working normally. If there was a fraudulent connection, there would be a record. Take-you nodded his head as if he understood. Well, if you delete the record, there will be a record that you deleted it. Keris originally started out as a company that made operating systems that control cars, including autonomous driving. As such, he has been thoroughly managing security issues. If that had really happened, I wouldn't have noticed it until now. Technology is not over once developed. Keris autonomous driving technology is still evolving with machine learning and big data. You can clone and sell Windows, but you can't make updates or next versions. It would be difficult to guarantee that there were no problems during the copying process. But China has a huge market of 1.5 billion. If Zhou starts mass-producing self-driving cars just like us and creates big data across China, it is highly likely to become a threat. If technology leaks are true, we can't stand still. Said Sergey. Even if the technology was copied, the price would be a problem. Even if you can make a car exactly like Keris, you can't make it cheaper than that. If we hadn't worked with Susong Electronics, we wouldn't have been able to offer the vehicle at the current price. Perhaps in terms of production cost alone, it will be more than 30% more expensive than ours. However, from the point of view of Zhou, there is no problem even if it is sold at a loss. Because the Chinese government will support it. Even if it sells at a loss, it is enough if the government subsidizes it. From the perspective of the Chinese government, if it can take the lead in autonomous driving, it can spend trillions of yuan. I leaned my back on the chair and fell asleep. How did Zhou steal Karis' skills? And how can you prove it? At that moment something flashed in front of my eyes. What is this? Does it have anything to do with the current situation? When I woke up, everyone was staring at me. In the eyes of others, it would have seemed as if I was staring blankly into the air instead of talking. I said calmly. I was thinking for a while. Taekyu smiled meaningfully as if he had noticed. I asked Ryan. What kind of server do you use for Karis? It's a Super Nano. Did you too? Is this a famous company? Taijiu said. It's a Chinese server manufacturer. These days I use a lot of the motherboard when setting up my computer. Ryan nodded his head. Yes. It is the largest server manufacturer in China. What other company is using that server besides us? Play Gubble AMZ Face Note etc. It would be quicker to ask which companies are not using it. Until just 10 years ago, Super Nano was only a small and medium-sized company in China. But at some point it began to grow rapidly. Most of the sales are generated by B2B and are supplied to companies and government offices around the world. Some have excellent stability, but the biggest advantage is that the price is 20% cheaper than other companies. Super Nano used this price competitiveness as a weapon to dominate the server market. But there is a spy chip on the server they made there? As the name suggests, it is probably a device that secretly attaches to a device and extracts information. Could it be that you took away our technology with that? I said with a tired look. I just arrived and I am a little tired. I take a 30-minute break and do it. Okay. The staff led us to the break room. After confirming that no one was there, Taekyu immediately asked. Are you awake? I nodded and asked. Do you know what a spy chip is? Something like a backdoor? It's literally the back door. In buildings where security is important, CCTV and door locks are installed. At the front door to prevent outsiders from entering at will, and security guards protect them. It is difficult for unauthorized people to enter, and if they break in, evidence will remain. But what if the architect who built the building made an invisible back door without the owner's knowledge and had the key? If you go through a back door, you can access the operating system or programs as much as you want or leave no evidence, right? Right. You can sneak in through a window you accidentally open on the first floor, but that's just a security loophole. The difference between the two is whether the developer has intentions or not. Is that even possible with hardware? Perhaps it is possible. Ting asked me. What the hell did you get foreshadowing? I told Yeji I had just seen and Taekyu was surprised. What? Is that real? First of all, we need to check if Yeji is right. This is usually not a big deal. If it turns out to be true, wouldn't it be possible to blow it up properly? The meeting started again and I said to Ryan. First, we need to find the source of the leak. Check all the company server rooms and data centers. I checked it several times and there was no problem. Hacking is impossible. I shook my head. Look at the hardware, not the software. Are there any unnecessary chips inserted in the server parts supplied by Super Nano? Everyone was surprised by my words. What? Are you suspicious of the backdoor? In fact, the controversy over backdoors in Chinese IT companies has not ceased for a long time. Intelligence agencies around the world are concerned about this and have banned the use of Chinese-made telecommunication equipment and electronic devices. However, the reality has never been clearly discovered. Even if something comes out, it is bound to escape because it is a security loophole or a mistake in the distribution process. Since it cannot be said that I saw it as foreknowledge, I attached a suitable reason. I can't reveal the source, but I've heard some stories. Check it out. You have to shut down the server to take it apart and check it out. There is a backup server, so there should be no problem if you check them sequentially. Ryan didn't seem to believe me very much, but he faithfully followed my instructions. Inspection started immediately. We washed and unpacked at a nearby hotel. Taekyu asked. If you have already stolen Karis autonomous driving technology, why did you propose a joint venture with various conditions? Are you going to take out the OTK battery technology too? It won't be there, but wasn't it necessary to justify that they received or developed technology in a normal way? If the technology and know-how had been learned in the process of the joint venture, no one would have doubted even if the results were similar. But since we rejected it, did we just wrap it up with our own technology and release it? While I was talking to Take You, I got a call from an unknown number. I pressed the call button. Where are you now? I know who you are just by hearing your voice. I gladly replied. This is Detroit. Long time no see, President. Why did you come without a word? Because of work. I couldn't contact you because I was in a hurry. How long are you going to be there? Now that you've come this far, why don't you take a look at your face? I will see you at the White House soon. I have something to tell you. I wonder what you're talking about. I will meet you and tell you. If the spy chip turns out to be true, there will be quite a lot to talk about. Ronald said with a smirk. Ha, just talk before you come. I will open a state welcome event with hospitality. Oh, thank you. My hands and feet shrivel just thinking about it. Don't ever tell me in advance. While Ryan and the tech team were tearing apart the Super Nano server and inspecting each one, I called Zhoucha's vice chairman Wang Yichang. He welcomed my call. Nice to meet you, CEO Kong Jin Hu. After that, the call was made through an interpreter over there. I enjoyed Zhoucha's presentation. Congratulations on the new car launch. Though, we still have a long way to go to follow Karis. It was a pity that the last meeting ended early. I want to see you one more time. When are you free? Is it because you think that you want to meet urgently because it is a sad situation? Vice Chairman Wang Yichang gave a cool reply. Haha, any time is fine. If it's a meeting with CEO Kong Jin Hu, we have to make time for it even if it doesn't exist. And I'd like to meet Li Sui, Commerce Manager too. I have something important to tell you. It is known that Vice Chairman Wang Yichang is of Chinese descent from Chongping and has been in politics, so he is known to be close with Director Li Sui. He thought for a moment and then he said, Hey, let me tell you one more time. At the same time, the head of the Chinese Ministry of Commerce is planning to visit Hong Kong and move to Macau. So we decided to meet in Macau. Karis's work was entrusted to Take You. You can't go to a casino and gamble without me. Why? Are you afraid of losing any money? No. I'm afraid I'll get mad while playing baccarat and say I'm going to buy the whole casino. It would be possible. I flew to Macau with the bodyguards and arrived at the Grand Dayton Casino Hotel, the meeting point the day before. I looked out the window and saw a huge bridge across the sea in the distance. It is none other than Kangjueo Bridge, which is about to open. It is 55 kilometers long and connects Zhuhai, Hong Kong and Macau in Guangdong Province. For the passage of ships, about 7 kilometers of this is connected by an undersea tunnel. There are 2 artificial islands in the middle of the bridge, and through them, you enter the undersea tunnel and then exit again. Felt like a great wall or a pyramid. What country in the world could make such a thing other than China? Looking at this, the size is definitely a big country. But why are you doing this? While I was thinking about what to say at the meeting tomorrow, I got a phone call from Take You. Read more at wuxiax.com. How are you? Take You said in an excited voice. I found a spy chip. Is that really true? It was randomly embedded in the motherboard. I'll send you a picture now, so check it out. I received the photo. I circled it, but I couldn't see it properly with the naked eye. Hey, somehow if you said you copied it here and there must have been something like this. Everyone stay quiet until I tell them to. You can't go outside. Hey, come back soon. I hung up the phone and thought, how can I actually use this? At the appointed time, Vice Chairman Wang Yichang arrived first. And not long after, a middle-aged man in a suit and glasses came in. The suit had a badge in the shape of a 5-star red flag. This person is Li Sui, Director of the Ministry of Commerce of China. Like President Zhang Pinghua, he is a member of the Prince's Party, and his grandfather was with Mao Zedong until the end of the campaign. It's the first time we've met in person, but it's often on the news, so it's kind of familiar. Perhaps it will be the same for him. Manager Li Sui seemed to be happy and grabbed my hand with both of his hands. This is Li Sui. It is very nice to meet Professor Kong, who is famous all over the world like this in person. I am also happy to have met the manager. After saying goodbye, we sat down. Vice Chairman Wang Yichang spoke and an interpreter delivered his words. The proposal I gave you last time is still in effect. China hopes to open up the future with OTK company. I see. These children are so quiet that they look down on people. The reason I asked to see you two today is this. First of all, I would like you to lift the unfair sanctions against Susong Electronics, Unsung Motors and OTK company. At my words, Manager Li Sui coughed as if uncomfortable. I don't know what Professor Kong is talking about. The Chinese government only handles business according to established procedures and regulations, and never does anything unfair. Vice Chairman Wang Yichang also helped. Yes. It seems that CEO Kong Jinhu is misunderstanding something. As long as the mistakes are corrected, there will be no problem with business reopening. Correcting mistakes here means that it depends on my attitude, right? Nevertheless, since we had such a good meeting today, everything will be fine in the future. At Li Sui's words, Vice Chairman Wang Yichang lightly clapped his hand. Come on, let's talk about work slowly, and why not have a drink while eating? When we have good drinks together, business is bound to go away on its own. I nodded. I will tell you one more thing. What? I looked at the two of them and said, Zhoucha stole and copied Karis autonomous driving technology. Please promise me an official apology, compensation and prevention of recurrence. As the saying goes that imitation is the mother of creation, it is common for companies to copy and sue each other. Didn't Susong Electronics have a battle of the century with NPL over smartphone design patents and technology patents? But if it's just seen and copied, it's just copy and paste. It is not that companies from other countries do not do similar things, but it is not an exaggeration to say that China is the only country that does this at the national level. If other countries had done something similar, they would have been buried in the international community sooner. Autonomous driving technology and battery technology are deeply related to China's national interest. If you stay still, you will do something similar. Their faces hardened as if they didn't know I was going to say something like this. After a while, Li Sui opened his mouth. What do you mean? If you don't understand, can I say it again? Zhoucha copied Karis's technique. Vice Chairman Wang Yichang said with anger. On what basis do you say that? The basis must be the JW8 that Zhou has released. Just compare a few pieces of code and you'll see what you copied. What? His face contorted slightly at my words. Manager Li Sui shook his head and said, Professor Kong seems to have misunderstood something. I was telling the truth, not a misunderstanding. If we make an apology and compensation even now, we will no longer take issue with it. That alone will give you a lot of concessions. Are you saying that a Chinese company is stealing now? If stealing someone else's skills is stealing, then stealing is right. The problem of patent infringement by Chinese companies is not a day or two, but isn't this a bit serious? Director Li Sui then shouted and said, Why don't you try to hide your words? Even the president of South Korea wouldn't be able to say something like that. After all, who can say anything against the commerce manager who can control the huge market of China? I'm doing this because I'm like me. The Tang Dynasty Prime Minister Ping Tao said this. It is said to be a New Year's Eve Christian. It means, the mouth is a door to anger and the tongue is a sword that cuts through the body. In a nutshell, do you mean to be careful? I countered that. There is one thing that comes to mind when I study Chinese. A man named Do Chiak, who was famous in the spring and autumn era, said this. Even thieves have a way. Did it mean that even a thief who steals other people's belongings has a minimum morality, or did it mean that you are talking nonsense on the subject of a thief? Director Li Sui jumped up from his seat. I don't need to talk anymore. I will never forget today. Then he kicked out the hotel door. Vice Chairman Wang Yichang also stood up. He said, grinning, You will regret today. I smiled and said calmly, It remains to be seen which side will regret it. I headed straight from Macau to Washington, D.C. And there he joined Taekyu. Is the conversation going well? Not at all. Taekyu nodded his head as if he knew it. But if it was someone I could talk to, I wouldn't have done it in the first place. Well, you gave me a chance. I called Daryl and gave the order. After the announcement of Zhou Auto's self-driving car, China was greatly encouraged. The Chinese media delivered the news every day and praised it. And the Chinese government said it would remove regulations, revise related laws, and provide administrative support. National university professors who received government services poured out rosy prospects, saying that China will lead the future car sector and create 100,000 new jobs. Our technology level in China is like this. Now China is also leading the way in high-tech fields. I am proud that ZhouT is a Chinese company. It doesn't make sense to say that Keris, which has just released 2 cars, has a market cap of $200 billion. If ZhouCha starts mass production, it can be overtaken by Keris very quickly. ZhouCha fighting. Let's show the power of the continent. But here Carlos poured cold water. It is suspected that ZhouCha's self-driving car copied Keris technology. We urge you to immediately stop selling the related vehicle model and initiate an investigation. People were shocked by the announcement, and the share price of ZhouCha, which had been on the rise since the announcement of the autonomous vehicle, fell by 8%. ZhouCha immediately responded. Feng Yuran, the head of the technology development team, did not hide his displeasure. ZhouCha's self-driving car is an in-house technology developed jointly with Baidu and Wechant. Are you saying that Keris was the first to launch, so other companies shouldn't develop self-driving technology? Carlos will be held accountable for his unfounded remarks. Media such as the People's Daily, Global Times, and CCTV were determined and criticized Carlos' remarks. At the same time, rather than directly accusing Carlos, an American company, he cleverly pushed the blame for Kong Jinhu. Experts said in a sharp voice. Jinhu Kong is ignoring Chinese technology. He is an investor, not an entrepreneur. He must be considered a speculator, to be exact. It is clear that they are sniffing money, talking about patent infringement and trying to extort money from Chinese companies. You must not succumb to this speculative behavior. The party and the people must work together to respond strongly. Chinese netizens were outraged. Jinhu Kong insulted China. It's ridiculous. There is a degree to which you look down on a large country. ZhouCha's self-driving car is a pure Chinese technology developed jointly with Baidu and Wechant. Isn't Samsung Electronics copying Nokia in the past and NPL now? Korea is the origin of Sanjay. Chinese people live and struggle to gain face even when they die. But Kong Jinhu completely ruined our face. All Korean products must be withdrawn. Starting today, all Korean dramas, movies, and entertainment shows will be discontinued. Don't go to Korea and don't use Korean products. Exclude all celebrities affiliated with EDM entertainment from Chinese broadcasting, and ban imports of movies and dramas invested by EDM entertainment. Let's teach them clearly what will happen if they insult China. Retaliation appeared immediately. On the internet, photos of the Unsung car and Samsung Electronics smartphones and TVs were posted, and protests continued in front of Reitmart. As a result, Korean companies with large sales in China were stunned. Unsung Motors and Samsung Electronics have virtually ceased operations in China. The Chinese government practically banned package tours to Korea, and the travel industry, hotels and duty-free shops, which are heavily dependent on Uyghurs, Chinese tourists, were hit hard. The damage to the Ceylon hotel was also serious. As China entered into blatant retaliation, dissatisfaction poured out from the political circles all at once. Representative Lee Jong-hai of the Liberal National Party raised her voice, saying that South Korean companies should apologize immediately, citing the loss of Korean companies. Taekyu said as if he was absurd. Who is that Jinsei expert on? At least not on my side. I received a call from Chairman Im Jin-young. Is it true that ZhouCha stole Keris skills? Yes. That's for sure. Then he sighed. Then it's usually not a big deal. Still, Carlos' announcement was too hasty. Do you not know what kind of country China is? No, that's it. You can't just get past this. From my words, Chairman Im Jin-young seemed to have noticed something. Is there any solution? Trust me and wait a little bit. Okay. I hung up. International relations are like the gangster world, and the logic of force is thoroughly applied. If you go around punching for no reason, your reputation will suffer, but China is not a country that cares about that. In the end, the weak guy just has to be beaten unilaterally. So what should I do now? Taeyong said with a smirk. We can also bring a big brother who is good at fighting. I nodded. That's right. And I'm pretty close with my big brother. Ronald Stamper. A former real estate entrepreneur, he became the President of the United States without a single experience of public office. When he was first elected president, the world was astonished and all experts expressed serious concerns. But what about now, a year and a half after his inauguration? Surprisingly, Ronald became America's greatest president. In a poll conducted not too long ago, he even took first place, beating Washington, Lincoln, and Kennedy. The reason is, of course, the big one. The big one is the largest catastrophe in the United States. The 9/11 terrorist attacks are considered ridiculous compared to this. If Ronald hadn't prepared ahead of time despite everyone's opposition, America would have suffered the worst catastrophe. However, the United States successfully overcame that disaster, proving to the world why the United States is the most powerful country in the world. We met outside the White House. Ronald smiled warmly and greeted Take-You with a warm smile. Haha. Come on. Long time no see, President. He hugged me tightly as if suffocating. I know this guy is busy, but it's hard to see his face. The president has been very busy. After saying goodbye, we sat down. By the way, I heard that you met the Chinese Commerce Minister not long ago. What else is going on this time? Did Zhou Cha really copy Keris technology? Yes. I summarized the situation so far and told you. Read more at wuxiax.com. Ronald's expression became serious as he heard the story. As you can see, Chinese companies have infringed patents and undermined our manufacturing competitiveness. Indeed, Ronald has consistently pointed to this issue since his candidacy days. However, I just couldn't get my hands on it because I was busy taking care of Big One. I nodded. It can be said that all companies operating joint ventures in China are ripping off their technological prowess. However, the Chinese market cannot be abandoned. In the end, it was a situation that tolerated patent infringement with a feeling of crying and eating mustard. The Chinese government and Chinese companies are well aware of this fact and have not hesitated to take more blatant actions. In the past, there was a clear division of roles between the US and China. High value-added products are produced by the United States, and low value-added products are produced by China. Chinese toys, clothing, and shoes poured into the US market. China has become the world's factory, exporting to the world and earning huge dollars. The US had nothing to lose. It is the same in the United States that has gained a huge market, and new opportunities have been opened for American companies. Thanks to this, the United States was able to catch two rabbits: growth and price stability before the global financial crisis after the dot-com bubble. Recently, however, Chinese companies are entering the high-tech industry one after another. It has excelled not only in automobiles, ships, and aircraft, but also in the IT field. American companies have produced countless technologies and patents such as smartphones, systems, semiconductors, autonomous driving, and electric vehicles. But Chinese companies are just copying what others are already doing. They were not alone in copying the business model. Baidu for Gobble, Weibo for FaceNote, Aligeny for AMZ or Abei, Xiaomi for NPL or Susong Electronics. Moreover, these companies did not compete fairly, and grew thanks to support from the Chinese government and sanctions against foreign companies. And with the technology and capital they have accumulated, they are now pushing American companies out of the world market as well as China. How can you sell a smartphone with similar performance for less than half the price? Of course, Xiaomi has a low profit margin, but the bigger reason is that it does not pay patent fees properly and spends less development costs. Global companies spend huge amounts of money on R&D every year. But Chinese companies don't have to, because you can just copy it. The absurd fact is that they grow in size in that way and then start buying patents, mergers and acquisitions, and technology development. Once copied and stolen, it grows as fast as possible. And when the scale grows from then on, money buys the things it needs. It's an obvious tactic, but you know it, but you can't help it. As long as that side has the Chinese government on its back, this was an unfair game from the start. Ronald crossed his arms and said, "Of course the other side would deny it. Do you have any solid evidence to substantiate your claim?" "Yes. While looking for a tech leak, I discovered something important." Take-You held out what he was carrying. "What is this?" "It is a board that was ripped off from a server made by Super Nano. There was a spy chip so small that it was hard to see with the naked eye on the board. According to experts, it is possible to send data to another location or to access it from the outside without going through a normal process through this chip." Ronald's eyes lit up at my words. "Really?" I went on to say, "There are not one or two companies and government offices using this server now. We'll find out more if we look into them. Then it could be publicized internationally." Ronald looked at the board and said with a look of astonishment, "You can't even see well. How the hell did you find this?" "If it wasn't for wisdom, I wouldn't have even imagined that such a thing existed. I was lucky." In fact, the problem of backdoors in Chinese products has already been raised several times. However, each time they escaped, saying that it was just a security loophole and not an intentionally planted backdoor. However, due to concerns about this, some government agencies, including the United States, did not use Chinese-made electronic products at all and excluded them from bidding. I can say that this is pretty solid evidence, especially if it can be found not only in us but elsewhere. In fact, it is not known exactly what role this chip played. It is obvious that he would deny it, saying that he does not know it even if he brings it to his face. But what if it is found elsewhere? And what if it is the US government, not a single company, that takes issue with it? Then you won't be able to get out as easily as before. I said persuasively. China has forced global companies, including the United States, to transfer technology and stole intellectual property rights at will. I don't know what else I'll do if I keep going like this. The state puts its own interests first. No matter how close I may be with the president, the United States does not move easily unless it is in the interest of the United States. Therefore, this should benefit not only us but the United States as well. After the end of the Cold War, the world was reorganized around the United States. The United States led the world in military, economic, cultural, and diplomatic spheres. China is the only country that has challenged such a world order. Based on a huge continent and a population of 1.5 billion, China closely followed the United States and has grown to the extent that it is now called the G2. The United States will not allow it to stand shoulder to shoulder with or overtake the United States, even if it allows for a second-person position. Since his candidacy, Ronald has been voicing the need for sanctions against China, citing the trade imbalance between the US and China. He pointed out that the United States is running a deficit of hundreds of billions of dollars a year in trade with China. In fact, the trade deficit is the fate of the reserve currency country. Since all world trade is done in dollars, in order to use dollars, you must first have dollars. The US won't be giving away its currency to the world for free, so to earn dollars it has to export goods to the US. Then the US buys those things and supplies dollars to the world. In this way, Americans enjoyed price stability and affluent lives instead of a trade deficit. However, this brought about not only a trade deficit, but also a side effect of the collapse of the manufacturing industry. Previously, the United States was the world's largest industrialized country. But now the title has been taken by China, and American manufacturing is in great trouble. Ronald continued to point out the problem during his campaign as a candidate, citing trade imbalances with other countries, especially China, as the cause. The dissatisfaction of the workers represented by Rust Belt allowed Ronald to be elected president. The key is not to resolve the trade imbalance, but to revive the U.S. manufacturing industry. If the U.S. manufacturing industry revives by any chance, there is no need to resolve the trade imbalance. But surprisingly, it happened. Earthquakes and tsunamis hit megacities. Skyscrapers and houses collapsed and everything was swept away. This has created enormous effective demand. Not only did the construction industry revive, but manufacturing plants continued to run without a break. Ronald's promise to revive the manufacturing industry came to pass in an unexpected way. Ronald was busy taking care of Big One, and with the manufacturing industry entering a booming phase, he had little reason to sanction China. Meanwhile, China continued to grow its influence in the international community based on its military and economic power. The US is not going to be watching this for a while. If you plan to bump into one and break China's momentum, this will be a good cause. Ronald, who had been contemplating for a long time, looked at me and said, "Your clothes look good, so we can go right away." "Yes. Where do you want to go?" He got up and said, "Go to the White House press room." Taekyu stuck out his tongue and spoke in a low voice. "Look at the action. The press room in the West Wing of the White House. It is a place that people from all over the world have seen at least once. This is because the official announcement of the White House is made here and it is broadcast all over the world through the news." When I went out through the aisle next to the press room, there was a narrow space where reporters were gathered. Even though it was late, there were still reporters from various media outlets, looking for anything that could become an article. A reporter came in with coffee and snacks and everyone stopped what they were doing, sipping coffee and talking. "I heard that Jin Hukong is now in America. Why did she come without a word?" I heard from a Chinese correspondent that it seems like they met with the Chinese commerce manager and Zhou Cha in Macau. I heard about it too. But did Zhou Cha really copy the Keris technology? Well, it didn't happen once or twice. If you protest to the Chinese side, you won't even snort. What do you plan to do after Kong Jinhu? Since the technology has already been leaked, won't we be forced to work with Zhou Cha? However, if we do a joint venture, we will be forced to continue technology transfer. While everyone was talking, I worked hard to organize the contents in my head. If used well, it might become an article. But at that moment someone shouted. They say the president will make an important announcement in 30 minutes. What? After that, the reporters put down their coffee, grabbed their laptops and ran to the press room. The empty chairs quickly filled up with reporters. Moments later, Ronald entered the press conference room. In retrospect, he made several shocking announcements at this event. If I had to pick one of them, it was the moment when the big one happened. The moment Ronald was about to announce his resignation, the White House shook violently and he announced that the big one had come. The reporters who were there at that time have not forgotten the incident. Wasn't that perhaps the most dramatic scene in 21st century American history? Ronald looked around the reporters and said, "I am going to make a major announcement from now on. Prior to the presentation, we had an important guest here." Then an Asian young man came in. The moment they saw him, the reporters were astonished. It was none other than Jinhu Kong, CEO of OTK Company. This was his first visit to the White House press room. Reporters quickly pounded on their laptops and posted articles. Ronald stepped aside and Jinhu Kong stood in front of the microphone. "Nice to meet you. This is Jinhu Kong." After a brief greeting, he immediately brought up the subject. As already stated, Zhou Cha is suspected to have copied many of Keris techniques. On this matter, he thoroughly consulted the president and he sympathized with Sim Awakened. A reporter asked, "Is there any evidence?" Then to his surprise, Kong Jinhu nodded his head. While he was investigating the leak path, he discovered a spy chip on the server. This server is manufactured by Super Nano, and it is presumed that data was stolen through it. Reporters were shocked by that statement. "Come on, wait. So, are you saying that the backdoor was intentionally planted on the Super Nano side?" "I am not sure, but I suspect it happened during the distribution process rather than the production process. The problem is that this server is not only used by us, but also by companies and government offices around the world such as NPL, Google, AMZ, and FaceNote. It is presumed that they also have spy chips. If that is true, important information and data of American companies may have been indiscriminately leaked." Then Ronald said, "The U.S. will immediately begin an investigation into Zhang Cook's technology leak, patent infringement and intellectual property theft. If China does not cooperate, the United States will have no choice but to take extraordinary measures to protect the interests of the country and its people." Reporters raised their hands and asked questions. "Do you think China will respond? What is the special measure you just mentioned?" Ronald raised his hands and said, "China violated trade rules and stole our technology. No matter what previous presidents may have been, I will not tolerate this unfair practice any longer. The special measure I'm talking about is the bulk sanctions on Chinese products. If necessary, we will gladly ban Chinese products and impose massive tariffs." The announcement was immediately carried around the world through the media. After the press conference, Taekyu and I got into the car and headed to the hotel when his cell phone rang. The sender is Vice Chairman Wang Yichang. As soon as he answered the call, he fired in an angry voice. "What are we going to do now?" "If you were talking on the speakerphone, an interpreter right next to you delivered the message." I said calmly, "Did I not tell you before? Apologize and make amends and it will end well. I am truly sorry that this has happened." "What? Are you saying that now?" "It reminds me of the word pengdwasuk. If the head is boiled, the ears will ripen naturally. If she can't get her hands on Zhou Cha, it means she'll get her hands on China." He shouted, "So you're going to turn the whole of China into an enemy? You should ask America, not me. Do you think China will stand still? Then what will you do?" I returned what he had said before. "You say that if a small country opposes a large country, it will lead to anger? Use your judgment." "What?" I hung up the phone without hearing any more. Read more at wuxiax.com. If you're sorry, he'll call you back. China was stunned by the White House announcement. As soon as the announcement was made, Super Nano's stock price plummeted more than 50%, and a market cap of $800 million evaporated into the air. The Chinese government immediately issued a statement denying it. Jinhu Kang's announcement is a nonsensical plot. China respects patents and intellectual property rights more than any other country. There is no such thing as a backdoor or technology theft. The atmosphere was generally ridiculed. Does China respect intellectual property rights? The bread exploded after a while. I thought it was only giving fine dust, but it gave me a big laugh. I got mad after the Gangjin. You're scratching the back of the head of China. Jinhu Kang versus Chinese. Scale is boring. Who will win? Haven't there been any people who have touched after a strong earthquake so far? After the earthquake, all those who turned enemies became enemies. For example, Your Excellency. By the way, is that spy chip real? It's not a 007 movie. Does it make sense to steal information about something like that? It makes sense. Last time, a backdoor was found in a Chinese CCTV and smartphone. That's why the FBI and the CIA warn against using Chinese smartphones and telecommunication devices. Didn't you say that CL Telecom in Korea uses Weihua communication equipment? Weihua. The company was founded by an officer of the People's Liberation Army with support from the Chinese government. It is not a matter of intercepting communications and stealing information if you like. Oh damn it. My computer's motherboard is super nano. All your personal information has been stolen. Even the porn list on the hard drive was stolen. Do not worry. Anyway, due to the last time light card hack, all personal information of Koreans was transferred to China. It has already been robbed, so there is no more information to rob. The same was true of the US as well. The United States is very sensitive to privacy. At the worst, NPL even refused to cooperate with the terrorists' request to unlock the N-phone lock. If a Chinese company intentionally inserts a spy chip into the server and steals information about the company and Americans through this, it is an act that cannot be condoned. Consumer complaints abounded, and NPL, Google, AMZ, and FaceNote immediately began to inspect their servers and data centers. Within 3 days, the results came out. FBI Director Cass Sunstein released the findings of the investigation. He said, putting up several boards in front of the press as evidence. FBI Director Cass Sunstein released the findings of the investigation. He said, putting up several boards in front of the press as evidence. The claims made by CEO Jinhu Kang turned out to be true. Spy chips were also found on super nano servers such as NPL and Google. It seems that they were inserted after, not during the production process, and we are currently expanding the scope of the investigation. The entire United States was in shock, and investigations were conducted simultaneously by NASA, Boeing, and Lockheed Martin related to the military industry. The Occupational Safety and Security Administration, BIS, under the U.S. Department of Commerce immediately stopped all sales of smartphones, telecommunication equipment, and electronic products such as Weihua, TZE, OVO, and Baipo. The shelves for Chinese products in U.S. offline stores have disappeared altogether, and the sales page has been removed from online shopping malls. The CIA started a search and seizure of the Super Nano distribution network in the United States, and also sent a letter of cooperation to the Chinese side. Super Nano said that the chip was not inserted by them and it was unclear what role the chip played, but no one believed it. Other countries using Super Nano servers are also checking in at once, and the Chinese company's spy chip controversy has spread to an international issue. The Korean government also launched an investigation into the Financial Supervisory Service and exchanges that use Super Nano servers. Leaking information is also a problem, but it is a serious problem that can paralyze the financial transaction network if it receives even a cyber attack. The U.S. media continued to report on China's patent infringement and technology theft problems. American netizens were outraged. Have the Chinese been stealing our information all this time? Then is it true that Zhou Cha copied Keris's technique? What did you not copy? China looks down on the U.S. Do not use Chinese products. You can't do it this way. China should be regulated. What did all the politicians do up to this point? The only thing you can trust is President Ronald. I support President Ronald. Ronald threatened China. China has been stealing our information and technology so that they can ship its own ships. How long do we have to endure? You don't have to buy anything from a country that fools America. We will thoroughly investigate this matter, hold you accountable, and collect compensation. If China does not cooperate, Chinese products will not even be able to set foot in the United States. Republicans and Democrats agreed on this issue. China completely denies the results of the U.S. investigation and says it will not cooperate with the investigation. In fact, the U.S. proposal was not acceptable to China. If they are investigated, U.S. law enforcement agencies will look into the core technologies of Chinese companies. This alone is difficult, and if it is revealed that the Chinese government is behind the technology hijacking, it will be condemned by the international community. Li Sui, Director of Commerce, spoke to the press. The Chinese government and companies have never infringed on the intellectual property rights of companies in other countries. There was no problem in the super nano production process, and the authorities are also investigating how the spy chip was inserted. Imposing tariffs on Chinese products based on unconfirmed facts is a clear violation of WTO rules. If the US does this, China will have no choice but to counterattack to defend its core national interests. China has expressed a strong stance against the US pressure, but under the hood, it has made every effort to compromise. As evidence of that, it was suddenly considered to increase imports of US shale gas and agricultural and livestock products. Experts also predicted that the trade war would be compromised at an appropriate level rather than going to an extreme situation as both countries would suffer damage. However, this is because I do not know a man named Ronald Stamper. Breaking news. U.S. imposes 25% additional tariff on 900 items of $50 billion imports. Emergency. U.S.-China trade war begins. What is China's response? Will China cooperate with the U.S. investigation? Is protectionism intensifying in the global economy? The whole world was surprised when what was supposed to happen became a reality. China hastily counterattacked. The same tariffs were imposed on $50 billion of U.S. imports. If the U.S. imposes tariffs, we have no choice but to impose tariffs. This is for China's survival. Ronald snorted. Instead of admitting it was wrong, China is blaming the United States. Now China will pay the price for disrespecting the United States. 2 days after China imposed tariffs, Ronald imposed additional tariffs on an additional $200 billion of Chinese imports. This is not the end, it is just a preview. If China does not continue to comply with the investigation, we will impose tariffs on the remaining $250 billion. It was about imposing tariffs on virtually all Chinese products. It even announced that it would increase the amount of additional tariffs to 50%. If this happens, Chinese products lose their price competitiveness. Of course, the United States was not without damage. As the price of Chinese manufactured goods soars due to tariffs, the price inevitably rises. But Ronald had an attitude that it didn't matter. As the economy enters a boom and workers' incomes increase, a slight increase in prices can be afforded. The Chinese government will defend the national interest. China, like the United States, has begun to impose additional tariffs, with soybeans and corn being the main targets. Together with the Rust Belt, the plan is to directly attack the Farm Belt, which is classified as Ronald's core support group. Ronald cancelled other plans and flew straight to North Dakota. More than half of the soybean production here is exported to China. China is attacking American farms by means of vile means. Because I know very well that you guys support me. But nothing to worry about. Just a little bit of patience and we will win. It also provided $15 billion in emergency aid to help the farmers. The damage to the American farmers has once again led to the damage of the Chinese commoners. Soybeans and corn are used as feed for livestock and as raw materials for soybean oil. As soybean prices soared due to tariffs, pork prices and soybean oil prices rose. Pork and soybean oil are essential in Chinese cuisine. However, as imports of U.S. goods declined and prices rose, food prices in China soared. As the two great powers opened their guns and fired shells, other countries and companies were terrified that sparks might come out. Concerning other countries' concerns, Ronald was blunt. The only target of the U.S. trade war is China. He also said he would increase imports from Asia and Europe. As a result, all other countries were in an atmosphere of watching the situation with their backs. As the whole world is tied to one economic bloc, the trade war will be a loss for everyone. However, it was obvious which of the two would do more damage. Most experts analyzed that the damage would be much greater in China than in the United States. This is because China's exports to the U.S. are more than twice that of U.S. exports to China. In addition, the US has begun to impose full-scale sanctions on Chinese high-tech industries as well as imposition of tariffs. Ban on export of production equipment, restriction on technology transfer, refusal to approve mergers and acquisitions, etc. As a result, all of China's current semiconductor investment plans were put on hold, and US startups such as Weihua, TZ, and Xiaomi were all halted. Li Sui, the Commerce Department's chief, was outraged. Are you saying that China shouldn't even develop technology? So, should poor countries be poor for the rest of their lives? President Zhang Pinghua appealed to the international community. The world has enjoyed peace and prosperity in free trade. Trade wars only cause damage and scars to each other. It must be stopped immediately. If you think about it, it's a funny situation. Originally, the United States has emphasized free trade by promoting neoliberalism and globalization, while China has grown through protectionism. Now, however, they have changed their positions and are arguing against each other. Most of the international community was absurd, arguing that China was in a position to say such a thing. Isn't China the only country that draws out a card of trade retaliation whenever a political or military problem arises? In the wake of the dispute with Japan on the Senkaku Islands, it banned the export of rare earth elements, reduced the imports of Norwegian salmon in protest against the Nobel Prize for Chinese Resistance, Liu Xiaobo, and strengthened the quarantine of Filipino bananas and fruits after a dispute with the Philippines. There was even a study that found that when a country's leader met the Dalai Lama, the country's exports to the public would decrease. It was such a rude and disrespectful way that it could hardly be considered a great country. From the perspective of the affected countries, there was no way they should have used their hands. But now that they face trade retaliation, they suddenly act like the defenders of free trade. Countries that have been subjected to trade retaliation in the meantime, especially South Korea, which had been beaten up until just before, responded that it was absurd. No, when was the time when you were playing Korea and when you were beaten by the US? What kind of victim cosplay are you suddenly? The continent's inner fire? By the way, what kind of nonsense is Li Sui? It's not that you shouldn't develop technology, it's that you stop copying. If we don't copy, can we not develop technology? No matter how much China is beaten by the Heavenly Father, there is no answer. Fighting Ronald. You're doing very well. China is in turmoil right now. Inflation soars and the yuan depreciates. Is the real estate bubble just about to burst? Humanly, let's not use Chinese products. That's why I don't use Chinese smartphones. No matter how cheap they are, I use yen phones. Huh. That's made in China. Don't you know that in phone is made in China's factory? Stop exporting fine dust, you bastards. But when you think about it, isn't it the beginning of Kong Jinhu? The entire country is being robbed by stealing Keris technology. The little ball that Jinhu Kong launched, haha. After the earthquake in China, I was completely blown away. If I was Jiang Pinghua, I would have wanted to kill him after the Gangjin happy face. Why are you touching Jinhu Kong? It's interesting, honey jam. When asked by reporters how long the trade war will last, Ronald replied, sad face, read more at wuxiax.com. There is a very easy way to end this game. It is only for China to accept the demands of the United States. But why doesn't China do that easy thing? Why? The trade war between the two hegemons was defined by one word: game. And Ronald is a matchmaker who has never lost a game. As the trade war intensified, Chairman Im Jin-yong flew to the United States. He said it was fun. You ate a good one. How the hell did you find it? I was lucky. Rather, how is the situation of Samsung Electronics? For now, China's retaliatory measures have stopped. Although there was no separate announcement, China secretly lifted sanctions on Samsung Electronics and Unsung Motors. It must have been difficult to continue to impose sanctions on companies in certain countries in a situation where they were pushed back from the conflict with the United States and appealed to the international community to stop trade retaliation. Samsung Electronics was competing with N-Phone in the premium phone market thanks to the recognition it had raised at the time of Big One. However, in the mid to low-priced phones, the overall market share was declining as it was pushed by Chinese companies. However, due to this incident, Chinese smartphone sales were suspended or subject to a boycott, and they enjoyed a comparatively positive return. On the other hand, Chinese IT companies have been subject to global sanctions. In the United States, almost all products such as smartphones, TVs, laptops, and computers were suspended, and European countries also restricted the sale of Chinese electronic equipment until the results of an investigation into spy chips were released. Taijiu said. But in the midst of this, why is CL Telecom planning to introduce Weihua's telecommunication equipment as planned? Well, I guess I said it was cheap. For reference, Weihua is an IT company founded by Jin Zilong, a former officer of the People's Liberation Army, and has grown rapidly in the field of wireless communication equipment with strong support from the Chinese government. After that, it also jumped into smartphone manufacturing, and now ranks second in global market share after Susong Electronics. However, Weihua has caused problems with backdoors and patent infringement several times in the meantime. Isn't it preloaded with apps that can extract information on smartphones, accessing competitor servers to steal data, or providing hacking tools to the People's Liberation Army cyber units? Moreover, it is not being listed as the largest IT company in China. There is no plan to list it after that, and the stake relationship cannot be confirmed. In fact, it was everyone's judgment that it was a Chinese state-owned company. In any case, in a situation where most countries are blocking Weihua's introduction of telecommunication equipment, only CL Telecom has decided to proceed with the introduction as scheduled. Taekyu crossed his arms and muttered. Should this be called a backdoor rolling? Chairman Im Jin-yong said with a smirk. Korea is an export-oriented country, and China and the US are the first and second largest trading partners respectively. As the saying goes, if the trade dispute goes on for a long time, it will not do much good for Korea. I nodded. No worries. It will be over soon.